Welcome back to Marketing Monday. My name is Tom Storey, and in today's video, we're talking about podcasting. How to create a podcast that people actually want to listen to. Now, maybe you have a podcast and you're just not happy with the results so far. Maybe you've thought about starting one, or you had one 2 years ago that you stopped doing and you want to revive it. I'm going to talk about the 5 things you need to consider when you're making a podcast as an active real estate agent, some of the mistakes I've seen people make along the way, and how you can avoid them. Thanks for being back here on the Continuing Education channel. If you have not already, make sure to like this video if you find anything valuable from what I say today, and subscribe to the channel. Okay, so podcasting. Now, about a year and a half ago, actually June of 2022, I created a podcast, and I had not wanted to do one for many years. I was like, everybody else already has one. I don't want to compete with all that. It seems like a lot of work, yada, yada, yada. I was making all these excuses up. But then I did it. Okay, it's called The Tom Storey Show. You can look it up on any platform, but we're actually the biggest on YouTube. If you want to check out our YouTube channel, about 3,500 subscribers now, and the average podcast is doing about 5,000 views. So it's really growing over that period of time. So everything I'm going to share with you today in this video comes from personal experience of going through this, learning along the way, making my own mistakes, and I want to share how you can kind of skip all the frustration right off the gate and actually make it successful. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, Tom, didn't you write a blog on BAM in March about this exact same topic? I did, but if there's one thing I've learned from Eric Simon, if he gets to make dad at inspection jokes once a day for the rest of his life, I get to repurpose some of my content as well. So number one, know your audience. The biggest mistake that I'm seeing real estate agents make is they are making real estate podcasts for the real estate industry. Listen, if you're Byron, if you're Eric, if you're Tom Toole, if you're people that are making content for real estate agents and they're your target audience, and you have something to sell them. By the way, if you haven't signed up for BAMx, you absolutely should. Use code STORY23. Then yes, that's who your audience is. But if you are an active real estate agent, shouldn't your audience be consumers? And I fully understand, yeah, having realtors listen is great for potential referral business, or maybe you're in a model like EXP or Real or other companies like that where you could have a downline and you want to build a persona online so that people reach out to you. I fully recognize that. But for most of you watching this right now, I think you just have to be very clear who is your audience. It's buyers and sellers in your market. So if you make a real estate podcast and interview other real estate agents and just talk about tactics to sell more real estate, that's great. But you're competing with the Tom Ferrys of the world. You're competing with the Buffinis of the world. All these other people that have great platforms and podcasts, you're competing with them. I would make a hyper-local podcast for your real estate market where you're talking directly to consumers. The second piece of advice I want to give you is you got to do this on audio and on video, okay? So it's 2 different audiences. We've learned that our audio downloads are a lot of people listening in the car, which makes sense, but our YouTube channel is where most of our growth of the podcast actually has. So even though we do rank typically in the Apple 150 for business for Canada, at least that's where my podcast is from, our biggest channel is YouTube. So I think this is pretty simple. But if you're going to record the podcast, do it in a way that visually they can see you and they can hear you. You take the audio track, you put it onto Anchor. That's at least the platform that we've been using that puts it onto all the different audio streaming services, and we upload the video to YouTube. The third piece of advice is partnering up with a co-host. If I had done this on my own from the beginning, truthfully, I would not still be doing it right now because it'd be so easy just to not do it one week because I wasn't feeling it. But if you have a co-host you can be accountable for, I think it's really, really good. I also think you should get someone that has potentially different opinions than you. So I live in Toronto in Canada, which is like Eastern Canada if you look on a map, and my co-host lives in Vancouver, which is Western Canada. So we have different perspectives. We're also not competing with each other in the same market, and our views are different. Like if we just sat there for an hour every week and agreed with each other, that's a boring podcast, right? You gotta have someone that at least you see things a little bit different from. The fourth piece of advice is let the guests do the heavy lifting. So if it's just you and your co-host every week, it could become a little bit stale. So we have guests on, I would say for every 10 episodes, 8 of them have guests. And then the me and Steve episodes, he's my co-host. We call those the catch-up episodes, which we'll do every once in a while. But 80% of the time, you're having a guest on and you let them do the heavy lifting. Some of the feedback that we got from the beginning of the podcast is that people could tell I was prepping for the next question. I've completely scrapped that. We don't tell our guests anything we're going to ask them. They just come on. We have an organic conversation. I found since we've been doing it that way, the feedback has been a lot more positive. And the fifth piece of advice is going to be the most obvious and boring thing I say in this entire video is you have to be consistent. Our podcast comes out every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We film every Thursday at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That is in my calendar forever, right? That's when we do it. We are also always 1 week ahead, so I never have to scramble, right? If something comes up and I just can't film on that day, we're always going to be 1 week ahead in terms of filming, but we don't usually like to do more than 2 weeks ahead because sometimes the topics you're talking about are no longer top of mind for the viewers if news has moved on to different things. So those are my 5 pieces of advice. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, okay, Tom, that's great, but where do I go from here? BAMx actually has a course taught by Bobby about podcasting, how to set up your podcast, the equipment that you need, everything that you need to do. I would highly recommend you check that out. You're a real estate agent, and your goal should be waking up every single day and finding a buyer, a seller, or potentially someone looking to lease to reach out to you and connect with them and book an appointment. So when you're making a podcast, you have to think that you are speaking with those people. If you want to make another real estate sales training podcast, by all means, go for it, but just understand who your audience is. Me, as an active real estate agent, I want people in Toronto to listen to my podcast and reach out to me, and you know what? They have been. It's working. It's getting business for us, and we've got sponsorships on the podcast now. It's really grown over a period of time. But I'd say to you, go back, watch our first episodes, watch how we stumbled our way through the first 10, 20 episodes, and then we slowly started figuring it out. I hope that video was valuable to you. I think you have something to say. I think what you say is valuable. Don't think you have nothing to say. If you have awesome conversations with people that you respect, I guarantee you there's listenership for anybody out there. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week.